There we go. All right. I don't know if today is the finale of Phoenix Wright. Usually, you can expect the last case to be long and involved. We may not finish it today, but I think if we don't, we will finish it tomorrow. Not tomorrow, Thursday. Turnabout for tomorrow. We had just finished up. Right, we had officially declared. So even though it was a completely unofficial trial, like the verdict that we came to was binding in some way. Oh well, and then after the verdict, after the judge passed the verdict, or did he get to pass it? He got interrupted, didn't he? Because Apollo burst in. So this is where we are now. Mr. Justice, please explain yourself. It's very simple. There isn't much to explain. The defendant, Ms. Athena Sykes, might not be innocent. What are you talking about? The case from 7 years ago has been settled. I'm not talking about the past here. I'm talking about the present case. It's still not clear who killed Clay Tarrant. But Apollo, why would you... Ms. Sykes, please listen quietly to what I have to say. What in the world is Apollo trying to do? Your Honor, please allow me a little of the court's time. But this is a trial for the case from 7 years ago. Ms. Blackwell, I'd like to ask a favor of you. Just as you lost someone close to you, I lost someone close to me, too. I'm sure you want to know the real truth of what happened as much as I do. Apollo. Sure, you know I'm all for the truth. Now, let's see you expose the princess's guilt. Judge, I give my permission. Continue with the trial. Very well. Is that all right with you, Prosecutor Edgeworth? The prosecution has no objections. Let's hear Mr. Justice's testimony. I'll have the police's investigation report brought immediately. Not you too, Edgeworth. I really hope it's because you have something up your sleeve. Very well. Your opening statement, please, Prosecutor Edgeworth. I only just woke up, as usual. As you wish. Let's review the case of the murder of Mr. Clay Tarrant. It was made clear in the previous trial that Solomon Starbuck was not his killer. Therefore, the true culprit was someone else. On that day, this culprit waited for the astronauts in boarding lounge 1. When the two men made their escape out of the Space Museum, the killer attacked Mr. Tarrant with the same type of knife that was used 7 years ago. The murderer then escaped into the Space Museum. Next, Director Yuri Cosmos switched the launch pads. After that, the culprit exited the Space Museum and escaped via boarding lounge 2. Therefore, this trial must make clear who Mr. Tarrant's true killer was. In other words, we must discover who it was that escaped through the Space Museum that day. Thank you, Prosecutor Edgeworth. Mr. Wright, is the defense ready? Yes, Your Honor. I better rearrange my evidence. Relevant. Swapped in? Did I have spare evidence that wasn't being held in the court record? Can it even be called evidence? Now then, Mr. Justice, your testimony, if you please. That's a strange... Why would they do that? Why would they go, like, here's evidence that will be used eventually. I'll swap it out, but then we'll swap it back in. Like, just, I guess, to keep your inventory small. But it's not like we've ever had more than, like... Okay, I guess we have 15. That is kind of a lot now. I guess if they went any higher than 15, it's kind of too much. Alright, I don't have a problem with that. Bloop. I suspected Ms. Sykes of the murder of Clay Tarrant. My growing suspicions were confirmed when this incriminating evidence presented itself. In addition, she's the only one who could have utilized the launch pad switch to escape. That is why I wish to indict Ms. Sykes on the charge of murder. You do that before court. You don't have someone take the witness stand in order to say, I would like to indict this person. Order in the court. Mr. Justice, you realize you are charging your own co-worker with murder, don't you? Yes, Your Honor. That is because that is the conclusion my investigation has led me to. But Apollo, why? How could you suspect me too? Mr. Wright, your cross-examination, please. Alright, so I have a feeling he does not actually suspect her at all. He is doing this because it's the only way to bring out the truth, whatever the truth is. I don't get it. Just what did you find out over the past few days that made you think this? Hello, EverX. Thank you for using my proper title. I just realized, does the... Yeah, I'm not crazy. Whatever. Alright, let's talk about the lighter. That's the lighter that was found in the Space Museum with her fingerprints on it, right? But even if it seems decisive, there must be other facts we don't know about it yet. If that's so, go ahead and prove it then. Look, honestly, I don't want to believe it's true either. But Ms. Sykes was the only one who was in the Space Museum at the time of the murder. But, Mr. Justice, Ms. Sykes had absolutely no motive to kill Mr. Tarrant. Objection! 7 years ago, Ms. Sykes lived at the Cosmos Space Center. It wouldn't be strange if she had some kind of connection to him. Besides, people sometimes kill for motives we can't even imagine. I know you've seen plenty of cases like that in your own career, Mr. Wright. I still can't believe this. How can you actually suspect Athena, Apollo? He doesn't. Hold it! Isn't it possible that somebody else used that same escape route? I'm afraid not, Mr. Wright. Why not? Recall there is a security camera. In boarding lounge 1 aimed at the launch pad door. It's the camera that captured Mr. Tarrant and Mr. Starbuck, but there's also another security camera in boarding lounge 2. It recorded Mr. Tarrant's killer, or rather Ms. Sykes, coming out of the Space Museum. Camera in boarding lounge 2. First I've heard of it, but it makes sense. Athena said she had snuck into the Space Museum the night before the incident, and then was overcome, and passed out until noon the next day. Which is an awfully suspicious, like, if we're being real. Phoenix, why do you believe this? I was out until noon of the next day. I didn't even know about the explosions. When I woke up, nobody was around, so I just went out into boarding lounge 2. That must have been when the camera captured her, and that's what made Apollo suspect her even more. But wait a minute. In that case, it most likely recorded the true culprit as well. Oh yeah. Last time you were talking about a repairman, coming into your apartment, got me intrigued, never knew how it worked here. Took a while to find someone I know that rents. Yeah, it does not normally happen. Normally what would happen is that you would arrange for them to come by, or if it was for some kind of maintenance, they would go, like, they would post something that said, next Monday or whatever, we're coming in to do the something. That's a negative on that one too, Mr. Wright. Yeah. Yeah, over here they are. It's just a difference, I guess. Because I don't know, like, what if there was an emergency? What if I wasn't home and there was like a leak or something? You know, a pipe burst and there was, I don't know. I guess that's not, I don't know. You have to let them in once a while. See, that would be unusual here, to go like once a, like, monthly inspections have, like, to me that seems weird, to go, oh yeah, you have to let them in once a month to check the place out. It's like, no, so somehow we have it reversed. Oh, they don't need to do an inspection, but it's not unreasonable for them to say, hey, let us in, we have to check stuff out. Yeah, I guess just that part isn't really codified into law or into the lease or anything. They wouldn't say that there's any kind of timetable for it. Just if they were to say we need to come into the apartment, they would, according to rental laws or whatever, that as long as it was a reasonable request, I guess, then yeah. But except that I wouldn't have to let them in. They do have a key. That's just the way it works. If you don't want to let them in, and there is something they can't come in. I mean, like, this is, it's not like a house, it's an apartment building. You know what I mean? Like, there's a common area, like, the people come by daily to, like, come into not into my apartment, but into the, like, you know, they vacuum and stuff. There's, like, a washer and dryer that they check on and do stuff with that. It's not, but I mean, that's, I don't know, that's different. I just woke up. I can't talk about things. All I can do is read aloud. And present evidence. In the footage taken after the incident, Ms. Sykes is the only one who appears. What? Why? Good morning. Good 6:30 p.m. morning. Order in the court. That can't be. But if it is, then it is incredibly incriminating. I object, Your Honor. This is devastating to my case. Wasn't it you who proved in the previous trial that the way the true culprit escaped was via the Space Museum, via the Space Museum after the pads had been switched? A fact you previously proved turned on its ear, leaving your client high and dry. What is this, a Phoenix Wright game or something? I must say, that is vintage Phoenix Wright. He knows. He's played all the video games. Edgeworth has the whole collection.
Hold it!
Believing in your client to the end is a basic principle of good defense. Shouldn't you extend that same principle to your own coworker? You're probably right. Maybe I'm not even fit to be a lawyer. Like, one thing that is maybe surprising is that if you are leasing from someone, whether it's an apartment or like a house that they own but that they're renting out, you have a lot of legal protection against them, like, kicking you out. Like, even if it's like, no question about, oh, I didn't pay my rent. I stopped paying my rent 6 months ago. They still have to fight really hard to evict you. Or if it's like, oh, you violated the terms of the lease or whatever, and it's still a nightmare if you are renting an apartment or renting a house and you have a tenant who is a problem. Like, you need to do so. There is no like fast track to go, yeah, you weren't supposed to do that, you have to leave. There's tons and tons of legal protections for people who are renting a property, so that even if they are like completely in the wrong, it's still very hard for the landlord to, you know, to deal with it. However, I don't care. This case is special to me. Clay was my friend. And that's why I just have to know the truth. Apollo suspected his trusted co-worker of killing his friend. To dispel his doubts, he investigated on his own, but that only led to more doubts. Apollo must have been really struggling with this. Well, Apollo may have doubts, but I'll say it again. Athena Sykes isn't the murderer. Then I have only one thing to say. Evidence is everything in court. Well, Mr. Wright, think you have the concrete proof to knock down my arguments? His points of contention are the fingerprints on the lighter and the escape route, huh? Apollo knows how I operate, so I can't use my usual tactics on him, even though that's what I'm doing. I'm pressing on everything. Oh, looks like the only thing I can do here is press him for more information. Whenever you get that hint, it means you have to press everything once.
Hold it!
And then the court will magically proceed. Most people here buy an apartment? Really? I guess we wouldn't call, like, apartments, you only call it an apartment if you're renting. What would you... I mean, there's, like, condos. Yeah, that's... Hey, thanks, Paul. Pardon me, hold on. I have something special for that. Oh. Oh, no, I don't. Still, thank you. Wonderful. I will someday have the bot up and running again, and it will someday have a thank-fated command. Can you believe it? We're towards the end of Case 5, Chapter 5, Episode 5. Game 5. Super Bowl number 5. I think we probably still will not quite finish today, but I will finish it up on Thursday. Yeah, I don't know. There's... Yeah, I really can't think of what you would call it. Like... It must exist, right? There must be things where they go, okay, here's a whole building with a whole bunch of people in it, and you're gonna buy an apartment. I don't know why we call it an apartment. It's more all together than, like, houses are apart, but apartments are together. When she saw the weapon that killed Mr. Terran, my bracelet reacted. I was just wondering whether we were ever going to get back to the bracelet, because I think we only did one of those this entire game, where he does the little bracelet gotcha. No, we did it twice, not once. She said she'd never seen the knife before, but my bracelet told me otherwise. And then, every time after that, my bracelet would react when she talked about the case. Poor Apollo must have been beside himself during that investigation. I didn't know what to do or think. An apartment, or flat, right, they call them flats in Britain. Self-contained housing unit, a type of residential real estate that occupies only part of a building. Yes. In that condition, I knew I wouldn't be any good in court. so I decided to wear an eye patch so I wouldn't be able to perceive any of her tells. What? That's why he has his head bandaged? So that's why Apollo was acting so strangely. But the reason Ms. Sykes unconsciously reacted to the knife that way is because she stabbed her mother's murderer with one identical to it 7 years ago. A condominium, often shortened to condo, in the United States of America, most Canadian, is a type of living space similar to an apartment but independently sellable and therefore regarded as real estate. But condo is not used anywhere else. Aha! That was kind of what I thought condominium. I don't know why we call them that either. Who comes up with a name like that? Stop saying condo, it'll never catch on. It'll never be a thing. And then it did. But that knife was also the murder weapon that was used to kill Clay Tarrant. My bracelet could have also reacted to her because she knew she was his killer too. Ah. I guess he has a point. But my bracelet wasn't the only reason I became suspicious of her. John Condominium. Lord Earl Condominium of Sandwich. Sandwich is the town he lived in. Pure coincidence. Your arguments have been very clear, Mr. Justice, and your facts appear to be indisputable. Well, Mr. Wright, what do you think of my theory? It stinks. It looks like not even you can deny it. Ms. Sykes was the only one who used the only possible escape route. Under these circumstances, there can be no other suspect but the defendant. Unless you think there was an alternative escape route. Is that what you think, Mr. Wright? Is that what you think, Mr. Wright? Is that what you think, Phoenix? Was there an alternative escape route? Of course. Yes, of course there must have been. Just don't ask me what. They got into the rocket and blasted off into space. You're just bluffing again, aren't you? Me? Bluff? No way. He knows me too well. He lost the trademark rights. He officially changed his name when he was 19 after he got sick of all the jokes. It's fine, Mr. Wright. Even a bluff would suit me just fine. As long as you can. Clear up this doubt inside me. Wait, so is that what this is all about? I want to believe in Athena. I really do. But what is faith without doubt? That's why I need to question her guilt. So that once the truth finally comes out, I can really fully trust her. So that you can really trust me? Inium, I almost killed him. Oh, I missed the Condominium, brother of Condomautium. They have the same first name instead of the same last name. It seems your junior partner has just showed us what trials are truly all about. I believe you're right. We prosecutors painstakingly question every detail in pursuit of the defendant, while we lawyers believe in and defend our clients to the end. When both sides go all out against each other, that's when we discover the truth. Precisely. And when the battle is over, we will understand the true meaning of trust. Is this the true meaning of trust? That is exactly what trials are about, wouldn't you agree? Yes. I couldn't ignore the seed of doubt that was growing inside me, so I decided I needed to face it head on. No matter what the truth is that's waiting ahead, I won't be afraid. That's so like Apollo, always uber earnest about things like this. The true meaning of trust is the friends we made along the way, and the lawyers and the defense attorneys, and the prosecutors, and the judge, and the witnesses, and the parrot. Mr. Justice, I vow to dispel every last bit of doubt in your heart. Good. Because I want to believe in Miss Sykes again. You're really hoping there was an alternative route, aren't you, Apollo? But if I use the process of elimination, there really aren't that many possibilities. Director Cosmos was at the southern exit, leaving only the control room and the corridor to the Space Museum. Which door could the culprit have escaped through? Come on, Mr. Wright, where do you think the culprit escaped to? Why can't I? Everything was frozen. Up here.
Take that!
Really? Damn it. I doubt anybody could have escaped that way. But can you really say with certainty that it isn't possible? Yes, I believe I can. I guess you're right. What are you doing? This is serious, Mr. Wright. Alright. Alright, so I...
Take that!
They really only could have escaped to the corridor to the Space Museum. All they had to do was use the unconscious Mr. Starbuck's prince to get through the door. It appears that all you're trying to do is establish Miss Sykes' guilt. If the culprit used that route, the only exit would have been into Boarding Lounge 2. The logical conclusion of your argument is that the killer is none other than the defendant. Ugh. I knew it. Yeah, buddy. That's the only way it could be, huh? If the culprit escaped into the corridor that leads to the Space Museum, I guess it's true. The only exit would have been into Boarding Lounge 2. But Miss Sykes was the only person captured by the Boarding Lounge 2 security camera. I investigated the crime thoroughly. But the only place the culprit could have escaped to was the Space Museum corridor. There weren't any other secret corridors or anything. Knox's Decalogue says so. So that leaves us with no other conclusion but that Athena Sykes was the culprit. There were like 4 other rooms on the map, but there aren't doors to them, is the problem. What could the answer be? Was there really no other escape route? But hold on a second. What if... Where did those mysterious leaves we saw in the corridor come from? What if they're a clue to the culprit's real escape route? They made like a tree and got out of there. I think it is possible that the culprit escaped into the Space Museum, but then came out using a route other than into Boarding Lounge 2. Oh? Launchpad 1 and the Space Museum were switched after the bombing, meaning the Space Museum corridor was moving along the rail at the time, which is exactly when an alternative escape route opened up for our culprit. Are you kidding me? Judging by the intense look in your eyes, I take it you're serious. Very well then, Mr. Wright, do tell. Where could the culprit have gone from the museum corridor? It happened again. I can't move it. Where could they have... You actually watched that Game of Thrones? Yeah, the one by Mauler. Yeah, I only watched the first season of Game of Thrones, but then I was overwhelmed with curiosity as to what Mauler had to say for 2 hours and 34 minutes, was it? about specifically season 8, episode 5. Hysterical. All right, so Did they escape to the launch site? Like, we don't actually know this. It was, the Space Museum was over here, and then they, which sides did they?
Take that!
Okay. I don't know how we were supposed to figure that out, but okay. We found something odd while investigating the museum corridor this afternoon. Namely, a few dead leaves on the floor. Considering where dead leaves come from, the moon? They point us to exactly where the culprit escaped to. Yes, I remember seeing some leaves myself. Ah! Do you mean... Yep, while the museum was in motion, just beyond the corridor's safety door. I am positive they do not allow that to happen. Was an alternative place that the culprit could use to escape. In other words, the culprit's real escape route was... the area outside the Space Center. Insane!
Objection!
He just keeps guessing during the trial until he's right. That's how he got his name. Phoenix. You're freaking insane! Do you know how impossible that would be? That corridor is level with the 3rd floor. Even if the culprit tried to leap to the outside wall of the Space Center building, they would fall to their death. Nobody can survive a 3-story fall.
Objection!
Ordinarily, yes, but after the bombing incident, the culprit could make use of a certain item. Could they? What item was it? I don't know. I actually don't know. This is what the culprit used to leap to the outside wall of the main building. Slowfall boots from Portal? Oh. What else have I got? I don't think they used the ladder while the... maybe they did, though. Maybe they probably did. They used the moon rocks to fuel their portal gun. Alright, I guess it is the emergency ladder. An emergency ladder. They used my attorney's badge. I'm the culprit. It would be nice if there, like, other games aren't quite as lazy as this, where they actually would have custom dialogue for all of the wrong answers, right? Or at least some of the wrong answers. It would have been nice if there was custom dialogue for every single presentation that you could make if you picked the badge. Wouldn't that be neat? Wouldn't that be a cool little... Wouldn't you sit and watch that video compilation of every time you present the badge and it's the wrong answer? I'd watch it for 2 whole hours. Really trying to go through the... That is one of the things that Legal Eagle did, not for my VODs, clearly, but for episode 1 of the Phoenix Wright anime, he watched it and was like, this is completely wrong. He was like, I know that it's a bit different in Japan. He's like, this is based on the Japanese legal system, or some mixture of the 2 legal systems, but this is, of course, completely wacky. There was an emergency ladder in the 4th floor robotics lab, and it was used that day after the explosions to help evacuate people. Ms. Blackwell herself used that ladder to escape down to ground level. Recall that the launch pads were switched after the ladder was lowered. The corridor would have passed by the ladder while the pads were being switched, and that's when the culprit literally sprang into action. And leapt onto the ladder. What? Who would have imagined? How the Japanese and Europeans imagined the U.S. legal system. Order. Order in the court. Well, An alternative escape route seems to have emerged. Which means someone other than Miss Sykes could have been the culprit, right?
Objection!
Yes. Did you miss it, Odd Garrett? We're having a fake trial, except it counts. It totally counts. Under threat of hostages, the hostages will be executed if we don't have a fake trial that counts. And we couldn't get a normal courtroom in time, so we're having the trial in the exploded courtroom. Making things up on the fly in an attempt to sway the court again, are we, Mr. Wright? Your theory has so many holes it puts Swiss cheese to shame. Alright then, name one. I have here detailed information about the Space Center. According to this, the distance between the museum corridor and the main building during movement is a full 20 feet. 20 feet. Pulling my leg, right? In addition, the corridor is 3 floors from the ground, or roughly 50 feet. What's more, the culprit would be leaping to a precarious place. An unstable ladder. Irk. Human beings feel fear in dangerous situations. It's a basic survival instinct. Criminals are a cowardly and superstitious lot who are afraid of ladders. An ordinary person would certainly hesitate before jumping. Or even freeze in fear and not jump at all.
Objection!
But the culprit had just murdered someone. They weren't in an ordinary state of mind.
Objection!
Nevertheless, why would they have taken that kind of risk? They could have waited for the switch to be complete and escaped to the boarding lounge too.
Objection!
Because there was a security camera in boarding lounge 2. The culprit knew they would be recorded if they left the Space Museum that way. In that case, the culprit could have hidden in the museum until things settled down, then blended in with the other people after the museum was opened. Alright? Why do we think they couldn't have done that? Like, that's the other way they could have gotten out. That's a good point. But you claim that despite all this, the culprit took a 20-foot death-defying leap, and all in the brief moment the corridor and ladder passed each other. That's also a good point. Nobody does anything that invokes fear. That's why nobody has ever skydived. They would have needed a running start to make the corridor. Also, nobody has ever, entered a rocket that was blasting off away from Earth and going to the moon. Ridiculous. They would freeze in fear. They would have needed a running start while the corridor was moving to make that jump. If their timing was off, or if they couldn't jump far enough, it would have been instant death. What kind of a person would attempt something like that? Stop bringing up good points, Edgeworth. This true culprit of yours is nothing but a figment of your imagination. Why do you always have to point out every flaw? Mr. Edgeworth's right, that does sound pretty insane. The culprit would have to be someone who feels no fear, like a stuntman, or someone with a jetpack. But everyone feels fear on some level, right? Or do they? I have evidence to the contrary. Wait a minute. Aha! I've got it this time. I can prove that there is someone who could have used this alternate escape route. Oh, can you now? This proves the possibility of a person who could have used the alternate escape route. Bloop. The Phantom's psych profile. The subject's emotions rarely fluctuate, and he doesn't experience feelings like normal people do. And we're going to bully him because of it. What's that, Mr. Wright? This is a certain person's very interesting psych profile. The subject doesn't experience feelings like normal people do. In other words, this person doesn't feel happiness, sadness, or fear. Doesn't feel fear? Right. You can't be serious. without the constraint of fear? He could easily do what an ordinary person wouldn't dare. Just as you or I could do a broad jump on the ground without the slightest fear. Is that what it's called? A broad jump? He had a running start, though. This subject could make a 20-foot leap 50 feet up in the air. He could choose this extreme, wow, 90s, way of escaping without hesitation. So you're saying that to a person without fear, the alternative route would be quicker and eliminate the chance they'd be spotted? That's definitely pretty extreme, Mr. Wright, but wow! But was there such a person at the scene? Yes. The Phantom. That mysterious, shadowy figure who keeps popping up. Veru Tracer. Oh dear. The Phantom. Again? I knew the Phantom was there behind the scenes of the Space Center bombing, but I wasn't sure if he was connected to the murder of Clay Tarrant as well. However, now it's all clear. This sounds like Final Fantasy music or something. I'm getting some, like, FF9 or FF6 vibes or something. Not 6. No, maybe not 9 either. No, like old school. Sounded a little bit like 4 maybe. I don't know. The Phantom is the one who not only bombed the Space Center, but also killed Mr. Tarrant. Order in the court, I say. Mr. Wright, please continue. There were just too many similarities between this case and the one from 7 years ago. Yeah, so... How did we even... Where did we get this? Where did we get this? This was... The person who was killed... Alright, so to recap. Episode 4 was about someone who was killed, like, in the present. Like, they were killed, and then the next day we had a murder trial, as you do. There was a bombing at this space center. They were about to launch. These 2 astronauts were going to go up into space. There were 2 explosions in the building, and then as the 2 astronauts were escaping the rocket and coming back across, one of them stabbed the other. It's like, oh, and he's like, no, I didn't do it, really. I was unconscious the whole time. He was on drugs. They drugged him, and he didn't remember what happened, and the video footage of him dragging the one guy out was actually the other way around. It was him being carried out, and somebody killed him, we don't know who it was. Separately, 7 years ago, the same thing happened. There was a murder, and there was a... Was there a... They at least threatened to... That's what it was. There was actually a bomb on the space shuttle itself, I think. They blackmailed... Like, they contacted the head of the space station and said, cancel the launch, and he didn't. And then because of that, there was an explosion in space, I think. And it was this big dramatic thing with, oh my gosh, like the astronaut almost died getting back to Earth. How did we get this? The person who was murdered 7 years ago was a psychiatrist or a psychologist who was doing all sorts of crazy stuff with analyzing feelings. So this must have come from her, but oh, no, that's what it was. We had a recording of their voice, and based on the recording of their voice, even though it was too, like, staticky to identify who it was somehow still possible to psychologically analyze the voice print. And this was what they came up with based on that. It was the butler. It was the space butler. They're going to find this phantom and pull his mask off, and the real culprit is Old Man Jenkins. Perhaps. No, I don't know at this point who it's going to turn out to be, but there are very strong echoes to case 1-4 and 1-5, which is unfortunate, because, I mean, unless they come up with a big twist, but both of those cases in the past turned out that they were like, okay, there was a murder in the past and a murder in the present, and we find out that they're linked, and the climax of the case is finding out, oh no, our person that we love, in 1-4 it was Edgeworth, in 1-5 it was Emma. And we're like, oh no, the evidence that we found proves that they were the murderer from the old case. Oh no, like we've spent all this time finding all this evidence, and this is what it proves. Oh no, and that person either forgot or didn't mean to or whatever. They didn't know that they did it, and it's like, oh no, we're going to, like, with this evidence, we're going to reveal it to them, and they're going to be a murderer. And it's literally, in both of the cases, they're like, this is literally the last day before the statute of limitations expires, and we're going to, like, prove that they murdered someone, and they're going to go to jail for the rest of their life. The same thing is happening here. Like, the same exact thing. So I'm interested to see, are they playing it straight, or will there be a twist? You making a psych profile of me? Good luck. You only have 1,000 hours of YouTube footage to get evidence from my audio. It can only be because both incidents were the work of the same phantom. So then, this phantom is the one who killed Clay? But who is he? This phantom has been haunting this case, pulling the strings in the background. That's a mask. Who could this unidentified international spy be? Also, they're a spy. Right, this escape route must have been a part of the Phantom's plan from the start, as was tricking Director Cosmos into switching the launch paths. The bomb on the second floor was meant to make the elevators and stairs unusable. That is quite a lot of planning. That's why he gave advance warning and planted the bombs where he did. Yes, I think you're right. But it doesn't explain this one last thing. What one last thing? So I lowered my emergency ladder like the detective leading the evacuation told me to. But it was such a pain. Why couldn't they have used the ladders in the other rooms? The robotics lab wasn't the only room with an emergency ladder, but he couldn't have made that leap unless he was certain which one it would be. So, you mean, the Phantom must be someone who knew that particular ladder was going to be used? So wait, was it Candace? Candace Arm, who is already dead? Or is she? Okay, is that it? Is that Candace Arm is actually still alive? No, she is really dead though. That's right. Who could it be? Wait a minute. So I've lowered my emergency ladder like the detective leading the evacuation told me to. Ms. Blackwell lowered the ladder after being told to by the detective leading the... Or wait. Was it Candace? Or is it... It's not going to be Bobby Fulbright. He's not... No. Or is he? If that turns out to be the twist, that's a twist. You've got to be kidding me. Did you figure it out, Wright? Do you know who the Phantom is? Yes, I do. Who is it? Who killed Clay? Our mystery spy, known as the Phantom, is none other than... She was on detail, but she wasn't leading the investigation. He was the one leading the investigation. Man, really? Really? It was Bobby Fulbright? That's very oh, maybe it's going to turn out that he got Candace killed, or he killed Candace because he knew that she knew. Wow. It's me, I'm the Phantom. The proof is this attorney's badge. After the explosions, a member of the staff crossed paths with a certain detective. I was on duty on the 4th floor. It was quite the madhouse, I tell you. It was quite the madhouse, I tell you. As for the detective who was leading the evacuation from the 4th floor, he had a very specific objective in mind. So I lowered my emergency ladder like the detective leading the evacuation told me to. His objective was to secure his own escape route. Yeah, I guess exclamation point hide stuff, but I just figured it out, and it's not really ambiguous anymore. I figured it out. I got it. We lowered an emergency ladder from a 4th floor window and escaped that way. Once everyone else got out safely, I made my way down too, and headed to the shelter. This is a detective you all know. He's even the lead detective on the current case. He appears to be a very emotional man, but his psych profile says he is without emotion.